to speak to you people that are from my roots about something so near and dear to my heart as men's mental health. So thank you guys for all tuning in. Thanks, Clint, for the opportunity here to speak. So some of you guys probably know me. Actually know my parents. My parents are Gary and Patty Johnson. My dad's family is originally from the Dowling Lake, Scapa area. They're railroaders. My dad worked at the Sheerness plant from when it opened in '84 right up till about 2001. My mom is Patty Johnson. She's in Unsworth from Garden Plain. So I'm really tied to the area that we're from. Really emotionally connected to all of you guys. We're just going to let my clock go here because it goes off every hour. But yeah, I'm really emotionally connected here to the area you guys are from. I know, your backgrounds, what you're going through. With a little bit about the farms, I was what you would call a town kid, but enough farm friends and grew up on an acreage for a bit there that I figured a bit of it out. Hannah was a hell of a place to grow up, guys. Couldn't think of a better place, really. In the summers, I was in the pool from probably about 11 o'clock in the morning. Public swim, seals, public swim, home. 8 o'clock at night, I'd probably get home. So, small town like that, all day in the pool. Lived across the street from the arena, so I was basically a rink rat all winter. And in a town like Hannah, that's where everything goes on, man. That's the center of the town in the winter. So, I was lucky enough. I was on some pretty good hockey teams. We went to the Alberta Winter Games there my second year at Pee Wee. Beat out a lot of the bigger centers around to get to that tournament. So we did some pretty good things in Hannah minor hockey. I was I was playing baseball one time in Serial, and I ran over one of the Olsen boys that happened to get in my way on the first baseline. And so Timmy Martin told me I was going to play football in the fall, so I played football. So all of those things, football, hockey, baseball, seals, all tied right back to how cultural sports are to Hannah and how they are to the families there. And what I didn't realize as a kid from that, though, is that the social aspect for the kids of the sports is also the social aspect for the adults and the parents of the sports. And so things that kids don't pick up on, adults do, or that the adults are going on, because in a town that small, people pick up on and people know, and bad news travels fast in a small town, basically. So you're gonna, unfortunately, if your kids are in the sports and stuff, you're forced to be with people that you may have, concessions with, things not going right with. But as kids, we were sheltered from that. It's interesting to know what the adults actually knew about each other's business and what was going on, and how much they didn't know about mental health, the mental aspect of what was going on with people. It was just, I wasn't really something talked about in town. There was, I remember hearing about a couple people who had, the proper term is died by suicide, but I was told, oh yeah, so-and-so killed themselves. They took the coward's way out. Or how in the hell could they think things were that bad? How could they do that to their family? And so in retrospect, I can see why people in small towns are apprehensive to talk about their mental health. I don't blame them, really. But what we need to understand about that is that people going through mental health, especially when you get to where you're at the point of actually considering dying by suicide, is not so much that you're in the mind of the person who may be suicidal, is not so much that they are being selfish as they are, they feel like they're relieving everybody else of the burden that they are. And so if you can wrap your mind around it to that way, where it's when people are going through mental health things, and especially when they get to the point of suicidal ideation and such, they think that they are the one that is being the burden, and that getting to that point is where they're doing everybody else a favor. So they're not being selfish at all with that. tying back to my story a bit, when we were 15, we moved to Fort Saskatchewan. I graduated in 2004 from Fort Saskatchewan High. And as you saw in the film, I basically went into the trades right out of high school. I chased cranes from Fort McMurray to Hardisty, Fort St. John to Regina, and pretty much every goddamn place between. So, my identity and who I was tied very much into my work and into, I'm a crane operator. And part of that is I've spent a lot of nights lonely in camp rooms or dingy oil field town hotels, and spent a lot of those nights at the bottom of a bottle, truthfully. It was easier to be at the bottom of a bottle than live with my own thoughts by myself. So I'd grown up in a world where mental health wasn't talked about. I was working in a man's world where, you drank with the boys, you went to work with the men, and just that was what happened. And so, all over, not really in great contact with my family, not always in the best places, and so just suppressing my emotions. It was not a good place to be, but that was what men do. You find a way, you get through it, you man up. That was how I was raised. That's how the industry I was in, that's how it goes. So eventually it came to a head, and I had gone through a relationship demise. I was in the crane. I was actually working on a major project here near home. So I was lucky I wasn't in Fort McMurray or Fort St. John or somewhere far away. I was in the crane. I was crying. I wasn't paying attention. And so I got, as you saw in the film, I got the help that I needed and was able to get a psychiatrist and some time off and start what ultimately has become a long journey to controlling my bipolar disorder. And, there's a lot of ups and downs that have been through that journey. I had to make a decision to stop drinking after a few run-ins with the police and the RCMP, and just things that I'm not proud of in my life. It's a constantly evolving cocktail of medication that I'm on to find ones that work, and when ones evolve and don't work anymore, it's on to a new combination. I lost, as I alluded to in the film, I lost my first marriage. I have also had two engagements come to demise through my work in the oil field and the lifestyle that it lived, and the toll it took on my mental health. And ultimately, what was the real kick in the ass was I almost lost the relationship I'm in right now, which also had, I have got 4 stepkids as part of this relationship. And so, that was ultimately, it hasn't all been sunshine and rainbows. I've had to make some major life decisions and lose some pretty important things and change some pretty important things to get to where I'm at the point where I'm this open talking about mental health and men's mental health and how it is a conversation that is worthy of being had. And that's ultimately the message that I think needs to come from tonight, guys, is that we need to know that this is a conversation that is safe to have, and that you're not alone in going through what you may be going through with it. You matter, and people do care about you. If you're going through something and you're afraid to bring it to those closest to you, maybe touch base with with some of the resources that were provided to you as part of the sign-up package for this presentation. They're all there for that express purpose, to help you with mental health. And they're people that don't know you and don't have an emotional investment in you, and therefore are a safe avenue to talk to. So if you don't have someone that you feel you can trust, which that's the first person I always advocate going to, is someone that you feel you can trust. There are definitely other, advocate or avenues that you can fall through to just to know that, to start a conversation, and to know that having that conversation is like a weight being lifted off your shoulders. It really is. And it starts a pathway that every step is forward. Every it's a pathway to improvement. And it's something that you're not going to be judged by. So yeah, so that's basically what I want to leave you with. I'd like to thank the Drumheller and surrounding area Rural Mental Health Network for organizing this event and for the invitation to speak and be a part of this. Like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from Treaty 6 territory. You guys are on Treaty 7. I'm a little more north, so I'm on Treaty 6. If you guys want to follow my story and my pathway to wellness and my advocacy, I encourage you to touch base via my Facebook and Instagram, which is at CJBeatsBipolar. And if you guys need to talk to someone, don't hesitate to reach out to me through there either. Like, I'm here just as much as anyone else to talk and to listen and to be a shoulder to cry on. Whatever you guys need is an amazing thing.
I'm going to start with Colin because he's just the first one that I can see. So I'm going to invite him in and then kind of go down the list. So Colin, you're up. I'd like to give you the floor to just introduce who you are, what you do, and just a little bit of your understanding or perspective around mental health, specifically in our area. So.
My name is Colin, and I spent 40 years of my life in Camrose on a hog farm. And then in 2005, everything collapsed in my life. The family farm went broke, and my farm employment came to an end. Our natural gas got cut off, and my 20-year marriage came to an end. And the point I always like to make is that I didn't lose everything in 2005 and then get depressed. In hindsight, I realized I had been depressed for years and years and years, and because it went undiagnosed, that's why I lost everything. That what depression did to me gradually is just eroded my brain cells to the point where my brain just went to mush, and I couldn't make a decision to save my life. And that the story in the video is my story. The only difference is that mine is agriculture and rural. But all the stuff that was talked about is also my story. And then also, like, I'm 62 years old. I continue to be in therapy and continuing to work on my mental health. And what I've come to realize, Clint, just 2 months ago, is that my depression actually started when I was in my early teens. And I spent 50 years of my life struggling with being disassociated, and that's all rooted in not feeling, right? And I'm 62 years old, and I'm now learning how to regulate my emotions. And I just want to pause so that people can hear that. Like, I'm 62, and now I'm learning how to regulate my emotions and to identify my emotions and feel them and stay with them, because if I don't, then I disassociate. And I spent enough years doing that. So my journey, talking about mental health, is my journey. And I've been involved with the Men at Risk program, Tough Enough to Talk, and I've been talking with men for probably the last 10 years. And I just happen now to be the local pastor here in town, or one of the local pastors.
I appreciate you sharing that and sharing the when it started, because I know we've got quite a few young men on tonight, local athletes, and so I think it's important for them to hear that. So I'm going to move next down the line to introduce our next panelist, which is Dallas.
My name is Dallas Leslie. I've lived in Drumheller actually for most of my life, since I was about 10 years old and just after school. Graduated from DCHS, played minor hockey, junior B, everything here. Currently, I'm a provisional psychologist with Wheatland County Counseling out of Drumheller in Strathmore. I also do some work in Hannah in my other role as a intensive family intervention clinician. So I work with a lot of families in the family resource now. A lot of the stuff I see frequently has been discussed at length. I see a lot of guys who are raised with the perspective that men always need to be in control of their emotions. Many were raised to think that emotions are a sign of weakness. Big problem with this is that guys end up internalizing the stigma about showing emotions and of seeking help when they need it. Way too often, the guys I talk to admit to only having a couple emotions, usually happy and angry. We've been conditioned to think that these are the only acceptable emotions for us to show. One thing that may surprise people going forward is that anger isn't actually a primary emotion. We kind of resort to anger in order to protect ourselves and cover up our other vulnerable feelings. Rather than either have any of these emotions, they're often so out of touch with the emotions they end up being controlled by. It's going to lead to a variety of issues that I've seen, including substance misuse, emotional mismanagement, domestic violence, relationship breakdown, suicidal ideation. Part of my role here has been helping guys recognize that emotions aren't bad, and experiencing them and showing them doesn't make you weak. We all experience these emotions, and the more we are familiar with them, the more we can see how they can influence us, and we can kind of learn a better way to. I just want to say again, thanks, Clint, for getting this together and inviting me to be a part of it.
No, thank you for being a part of it, and yeah, we look forward to hearing some of your responses to some of the Q&A as we go forward. Next in the line is Jerry, and I've gotten an opportunity to work alongside Jerry with a couple things, a couple projects, and so yeah, I'll let him take it away as the next, and go right ahead.
Thanks very much, Clint, and yeah, it's a real honor to be a part of this group tonight and this presentation. And yeah, I just wanted to thank Chris. That was an incredible production, really one of the best I have seen in terms of capturing the essence of the oil field workplace, which really epitomizes male Albertans, and I think that struggle to if you will, have a stronger sense of self. So you do it by what? Buttoning down, you hold everything inside, you stuff it inside, you burst ahead, much like playing on the offensive line, You're pushing ahead, always grinding. And yeah, and you don't want to show any weakness. You're absolutely right, Dallas. Men are afraid of emotions, and the acceptable stuff is the stuff that gives us status, power, control. And it's funny that we learn that early on. If you look at that emotional funnel for men, it's pretty wide when we're small. In fact, I look at younger kids. Little guys are able to express a broad range of emotion, but by the time they get to school, they're starting to learn all those rules about what it is to be a man, not to cry, and not to show that you're vulnerable, and any of those emotions that might portray you as being weak are not acceptable. But anger is certainly acceptable, and standing up and pretending you're a protector and all of that stuff. Yeah, very powerful stuff. And certainly in my work as an addictions counselor with Alberta Health Services, Addiction and Mental Health, and we see that a lot, because through that emotional funnel, by the time you reach young adulthood, it's well entrenched, and you've already discovered that substances can be a way to relieve some of that pressure, and all that comes with resisting being accountable for what you're feeling. I don't have to. Booze will take care of it. Substance use will take care of it. And the other aspect of my work over the past number of years has been working in family violence treatment. So we do run a group. We offer a group 3 times a year here in Drumheller. We're part of a provincial network that works with men, and not just men that have been convicted of domestic violence, because many of the men that come to group have if you will, a different form of pressure behind them. It's a relationship that's saying, hey, you got to do something or we're not going to be together. And I think of my own relationship of many decades, and my role as a counselor and what I've learned. It is about connection, and that was talked about in your film, Chris, as a huge piece. Guys learn to disconnect. Yeah, it is sort of that John Wayne role, if you will, but there is no such thing as being too needy. We need each other. We truly do. And we need our partners. And I can say that as much as a facilitator in that men's group for domestic violence, I've learned as much from the program, but even more so from the men that come and are willing to put themselves out there. And I'm humbled to be in their presence and to continue to learn myself about me and how I manage my own emotions and how I manage conflict in my relationships. And connection is right up there. Absolutely. Thanks so much.
No, thank you. Really appreciate having you here, and know that you're a wealth of knowledge, and look forward to hearing some of your answers tonight. And last but certainly not least, Martin, you can bring us on home there, Coach, and share a little bit about yourself and what you do and your views.
Working and learning from Jerry has been one of my key things with being in this field. I'm also an addictions counselor working with AHS in Drumheller, and I go out to Hannah and Three Hills, so Three Hills every week, but I have been privileged to go out to Hannah and work with many different groups out there. You know, what do I add? Gee, I mean, men, I come from a background in art, dance, sports. You know, as a kid growing up and other, you know, teammates in hockey, I grew up with playing minor hockey. I come originally from Trinidad in the Caribbean, and so I got a special award, most improved, when I came to Canada from a place that had no snow to a place that had ice that you skated on with these special shoes and blades. And I didn't know how to hold them up, and I got a special award as at the end of that season just to be able to function and play. I loved sports, played everything under the sun. But what I learned with men is, and boys, is that you stick it out, toughen up, get up, don't complain, play the game. You know, don't get help. Just get up, do it again. You know, and as a coach, I learned to not do that, to culture learning of a skill, learning of the love of the sport, to improve your status by your what you can contribute. That's what I try to do with athletes. And then I had the wonderful opportunity for the last 30 years of being a coach with Special Olympics. So people with cognitive and intellectual disabilities mirror us. And I see that with one of my key athletes in Drumheller, who mirrors men in particular who behave badly and behave tough and behave independently. And he mirrors their ways of being. And it gave me that reflection all the time of how I present myself to someone who has an intellectual disability. I'm actually being a model. How do I do that? How do I work with that? They taught me a lot, and working in that field, that's given me a chance to reflect on how I present when I work in addictions counseling and in coaching. So I've been coaching for 30 years. I'm a coach facilitator as well for teaching coaches to coach that population. I've had the privilege of going to many provincial games, national games. This is every 4 years, sixth. I just went to my sixth consecutive national games representing Team Alberta, and 2 times going to Worlds representing Canada. And all through all of those experiences, working with what it's like to be male in sport, and how to improve myself and also encourage female athletes. And as a male, what is my role with females? And even in counseling, how do I reflect a positive male role model in a counseling relationship with a female. And with my spouse, you know, we're 37 years together, coming up on 38. How to, you know, how our relationship evolves and continues to change, and how we have to accept that and not just assume that. And often that happens. I saw that in the film. Great film, by the way, Chris, and great that you're here to actually talk to and speak to it. I took a couple notes. One, Mike mentioned the cultural issue of talking about emotions. The fact that that's drilled into us as men not to talk about our emotions, and yet we're emotional beings, you know. And so often I used to counter that in my own learning, and I continue to do that to make sure that I'm okay with sharing my emotions and I'm okay with asking for help. But that, I found that was wonderful in the video, talking about that. So I'll end there, just going or just giving a couple more things. Just as an artist and going to art school, it was assumed that you're less of a male, that you're gay, that you're not male enough. You know, that was interesting. And when I went there, you know, just to prove myself as an artist, what I had to do to learn to be okay with being me. And that was really cool to see that mentioned in the film several times, with okay about being me was really important with the male. So that's appreciated that. And thanks for this opportunity too.
It's great, and I'm so grateful, and I know a lot of people that helped set this up are very grateful that you guys could all be here and be a part of this. Misty, take us away.
Okay, first question. When should someone seek professional help if they feel like they are struggling?
I'll jump in on that. Anytime really that you feel that you need to. You guys were all, as I alluded to earlier, provided with a document that has a lot of resources on it to speak to a professional in a confidential way. You know, ultimately, the earlier in feeling a certain way that you are able to address it, the earlier you're able to prevent it from getting to a point of, you know, where it's suicidal ideation, or where it's, you know, thinking about harming yourself or harming others. You know, the sooner you can have that conversation to start with, it's easier to bring it back down to a level of normal, as opposed to it elevating from there.
I would add to that, you know, if other people are mentioning it, other people are giving you those little flags and giving you flags to reflect on, showing you that there's things amiss. It's important to take the time to take a look at that and go seek that supports. And you know, that Chris, your comment about not knowing how many supports there were out there, I often find that amazing too. It's still people aren't really knowledgeable about what's out there.
I think we also have the advantage now, if there is a blessing from COVID, it's how virtual has been able to open up a whole new area of help, and even self-help. So a lot of the self-help groups that Martin and I deal with, and I'm sure some of the rest of you too, you know, everything from AA, NA, CA, Smart Recovery, all that stuff's online now, and you can be just about anywhere in the province, and if you've got a smartphone, you've got a laptop, you're off to the races. You can jump in, and you can do it with some anonymity, and without feeling like I got to jump in and dump everything out on the table. Not necessarily. You can just sit and listen, which is powerful, and that's a tremendous opportunity, I think. So,
well, I just want to add too to that sometimes all you need is a different perspective. Like sometimes you're going through something and you don't know, you think it's really bad, or it can be really bad, and just reaching out, the earlier the better. When you're starting to question if you're going through something, just having somebody help you see it from a different way can make a huge difference.
Colin, do you have anything to add just from your perspective as well? Because I know that you know, from my own background and stuff like that, being a pastor, it can be a really safe place for people to talk about this stuff.
The first time I got connected with a therapist was in '05 when everything collapsed. So everything collapsed in my life, and then I decided to get some help. That was my first journey through it. And then my second time, a year and a half ago, was when my spouse said to me, "I can't deal with your anxiety." But as the older I'm getting, a little smarter, I'm getting a little quicker on this stuff. And then I just got connected with a therapist that's a really good fit with me. And the first thing I said was, "Well, do you think my anxiety is connected to what happened to me as a teenager?" And like in her head, you could sort of hear her going like, "Da," right? Um, I think if you're thinking about it, then you need to. Then there's a reason why you're thinking about it. There's a reason why you're getting that inner nudge to go to, and seek out a professional that is a good fit for you. That if you're seeking with a professional and isn't a good fit, just seek out another one. From the pastor standpoint, the great thing in this gig is it's confidential. And one of the things that I've observed here in my 7 years in Hannah is because I'm open with my story, people know what I've been through, and they know that I won't judge them, right? That life's knocked me around enough and I've hurt enough that people can tell me anything, and I'm not going to judge them because, well, who am I? You know, I'm a washed up old pig farmer, right? So I think, and then my experience in working with therapists is just that non-judgmental, and they're safe. And what I've learned now, Clint, remember I'm 62. What I've learned is that if I feel safe with a therapist, I will tell them everything. If I feel safe with my spouse, I'll tell them everything. If I feel safe with a friend, I'll tell them everything.
Yeah, that's something that I really love about my position, is that it's all about that safety and making that safe space for the kids that I get to work with, and they're actually blown away. They're like, "What? You mean that you don't have to go back and tell my parents or tell the teachers or anything like this?" I was like, "Well, no, it's you're the master of your story, right? And you get to determine who knows your story." So, yeah, I will ask Chanel to take on the next question if she wouldn't mind.
For sure. So our next question is, how do I talk to someone who I believe is struggling with their mental health?
I think you said, Clint said it well, and so did Colin, non-judgmental and listening. And actually giving that person the opportunity to speak and to be heard.
I think that empathic response, showing empathy, trying to be there with that person and validate feelings. That's and being able to listen. That's crucial.
And then also to resist the impulse to try to fix. People aren't. We, like talking about myself, we really need to have people listen to us. But our impulse is that we want to get in and fix. And you know what? Mostly people just need to talk, and in the talking, they can often hear for themselves what they need to do. And then maybe at some point they'll say, "Well, what do you think?"
I don't have much to add to that other than that, if you can approach each conversation with like a genuine curiosity. Like, just be curious and kind when you're talking to other people who you think might be going through something. And don't go in with a preconceived notion about what they might be going through.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of touched on it. Go in from a perspective as a listener, as opposed to, and you don't have to bring your lunchbox, you don't have to bring your toolkit. Like the guys have said, a lot of it is just people will talk, and they will, through what they're saying, come up with their own solution. And if they're open to it, or if they ask you for your input, that's when you can when you know they're welcome to take your input. And then one thing that I like to advocate for in that situation is to ask them open-ended questions that get them thinking more about what they're going through, and just how to you basically help them through what they're going through instead of trying to fix what they're going through.
Excellent stuff. I get to ask the next question, and I'm kind of going to ask maybe two, and I'm excited to ask this because I've had the opportunity to walk youth through this process to kind of de-vilify the professional services, and walking through those doors when you make the decision to go and get help. So my questions here is, how do I access addiction and mental health services? And then what can I expect when I access those services?
You know, we used to have, before COVID, walking in, and first of all, knowing that we're here. I'm still always amazed that people don't know we're out here, but it's because we're not in their lexicon at the time. And we do have our provincial numbers for addiction and for mental health that can link you to any office or support network around where you live. So people often think that I have to go elsewhere to find support, but being the small town thing, if I go in the doors and I'm seen, the stigma, I've often had people come from Three Hills to Drumheller just because they don't want to see people in Three Hills see them go into our offices. Fair enough. Or, vice versa, Drum going to Three Hills or Hannah to get services to see us there. So we accept that, and that's okay. We're not going to turn anybody away who's coming from a neighboring community just because, because we know that small town issue. Often that happens too when you go to a bigger center. You go to Calgary, and they'll tell you, well, your office is in, you should go there. Well, okay, that's a bigger center, but so sometimes that message is sent to rural, and often that frames where people think of us in the service. And then people are often surprised when they come in and they go, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Yeah, and often I'll tell someone I'm not a doctor, because I've had people come in and say, Dr. So-and-so. No, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm going to work with you. And I'm here to work and to listen and to, to give you advice if you need it, if you ask. But I'm here to hear what you have to say, and then we can try to figure this out together. So that often helps to bridge, and it's a relationship building. So it's the relationships first. Then, like Colin said, then if you feel comfortable and safe, you're more apt to now talk. But if I feel guarded, there's not much you're going to get from me. So,
well said, Martin. Dr. McSween. I would, yeah, and as Colin pointed out so aptly, I think coming and finding that it's safe and it's confidential, and of course there's limitations around confidentiality, and we'll talk about that with the client. And I mean, with Alberta Health Services, of course there isn't a cost, there isn't a fee involved, and in fact our government has lifted the fees on inpatient treatment for addiction right now, so that's worth noting. And it is about collaboration. We want to work with you. We want to support you in your efforts to strengthen yourself and discover what's going on.
And to add to that, we're in rural, in addictions. I can speak to addictions. We're generalists. We work with youth right through to seniors. So on my caseload, I have youth and I have adults. I have seniors. And in the larger centers, you'll have youth services and adult services. And in mental health, you'll have youth, adult, senior services. So you know, depending on what you're looking for, there's that as well. So with the mental health side, you do have specialties. And that's different in addictions. We're generalists, so that's important to note.
Well, kind of speaking from, like, to add on to that, but speaking from private practice, what ends up happening a lot is you get, like, calling into a place like Wheatland County Counseling or sending an email. If you're under 18, we may try to get parental consent, but there are ways, there are times it's not necessary. There is access to subsidized programming and stuff available right now. Lots of funding's come through COVID. So there is ways to get access to resources without having to pay. And yeah, like's been touched on by Martin and Jerry before. There's a lot more option now in regards to online counseling and telehealth. It removes a lot of the issues with the stigma and the worry of people knowing that you're going in to see something. And even going outside of Wheatland County Counseling, there are resources in places like Calgary, like Eastside Family Therapy Center that does single session walk-in sessions, and they do it all over telehealth as well, and there's no cost. It's covered through home. So yeah, and when you come in, yeah, it's really not much of a different process than you would get at AHS counselor there, addictions therapist. We go through all the confidentiality and everything, and then just try to work on it, depending on what the issues are. And like Martin said, find the person that works for you. There's going to be a chance that you get a therapist that doesn't click. That's fine. It's fine to take a little control and be like, no, this isn't working. I need to find somebody else. It's your therapy session. It's what you're getting. You're there to help yourself. So always remember that.
Dallas, you touched on something that I want to say too, and that's really good. If you're not comfortable, we always put that forward to the person, but sometimes a male will feel more comfortable talking to a female therapist, and sometimes vice versa, females with males. So we've found that I've found that in my work. And so we'll often mention that in our first interview or first session with the person. Where do you feel comfortable? And the other piece is with a small town is if you see me in community, I'm not going to say hi. I'll wait for you. Because everybody knows what I do, and so it gives more power to the person to not feel shame and not feel that the stigma as well. And if they want to invite us to say hi, that's great. You know, so that's important too on the confidentiality side and the community side, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's all great stuff, and then the really cool thing about I think Drumheller Addictions Mental Health and Wheatland Counseling is it's more than just you three guys that are there. That they're quite big teams with lots of really great professionals, and I've been lucky enough to work alongside with a lot of them. So that's to make that known. I'm glad that you brought that up. That we do have quite a few people that serve our greater area here. So. Misty, you say you've got the next question. Go right ahead. We'll just kind of keep this moving along.
What is self-care and why is it important, especially for self-care for men?
I'll jump in there. I always like to use this analogy. If anybody has ever taken a first aid course, what is the first thing you do on a scene? Safety to self first. Why? You know, because if you go down, you're no help to anybody else. And so really important to make sure that you're okay before you can actually go out and help anybody else. And that's really key. And when you're okay, you're better, you're more able and more stable to be able to help yourself and to be able to see and hear and feel and ask for help. When you're in that closed silo of that depression well, you're not able to see very well, which it can be problematic for the person. And that's where it's helpful, as mentioned, with some people pointing that out to you. Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes that buries you in, and sometimes you have to work hard to be able to accept the hand up and to take. So self-care, I just kind of had some notes here, just ensures stability, reliability, clarity, health, ability to thrive. You're open to new learning. You build resilience.
Yeah, I'll jump in there real quick on that one. Self-care to me is knowing myself and knowing what my limits are and knowing how I react to things. So a big thing I subscribe to is what they call in the mental health circles, the spoons theory. And so my self-care is knowing that on any given day, I have X amount of spoons that I have to allocate to problems and allocate to things that may come up. And every time something comes up, I drop a spoon. And so my self-care is knowing every day, waking up, doing a check. Okay, today some days I have 20 spoons, some days I have 5. And so waking up, doing a self-assessment of what I'm going through, how I feel that day, and knowing, okay, I'm going to have to protect myself a little bit more today because I only have 5 spoons, as opposed to being on a day when I have 20 spoons and I can take care of myself a little bit more. So just knowing how much you're able to take by knowing yourself, and then having a way to address that when those situations do arrive. That's how I view self-care personally.
Well put, Chris. I would add to that some really basic stuff. Hey, Jerry, how you been sleeping, guy? Staying up late? That's a big one. Just sleep. Yeah. Did you hydrate today? No, I was in the Sahara, dragging my ass. Only wimps drink, Yeah, just simple stuff. Nutrition. Did I take time for some play today? And some reflection time. We hear that term mindfulness, quite a bit, but it is about that inner reflection and not criticizing yourself and being okay just with the present. And can I allow myself that? The other thing is, and it's something that Martin and I certainly use, is Dr. Mike Evans, who is a big one for self-care and stress management. But he talks about 23 and a half hours, and he loves to present lots of data to support the fact that, hey, if you can devote 30 minutes out of a 24-hour day just to walking, the impact is incredible across all mental health fronts. And I try and keep that one in mind. So simple stuff, basic stuff, it does work.
I'm pretty sure I annoy a lot of my clients with the talk about self-care, because that's a big thing. And it can be anything, like you said, it can be simple. You walk, it can be exercise, reading, whatever you do, need to take time to recharge a little bit. Another thing that goes along with self-care for me that I preach a lot is self-compassion. Like Jerry touched on there, just be kind to yourself. Just remember, if it's something you wouldn't say to somebody else, why would you say it to yourself? We get this internal monologue of negative things that go on in our heads some days when we have a rough day, and we're our own worst critics. Just sometimes that self-care is just being nice to yourself.
I think when it comes to self-care, and I recently did it was part of actually our PD day with the division, is that self-care is not just listening to more music or doing that. It's a state of mind, right? Like, it has those things, but you really have to be committed to really being healthy, and that's different for everybody. What fills our cup and keeps kind of our head above water, that's going to be a very personal thing. And I would invite the people that are here today to really invest in, like, what is it that fills your cup? What is it that keeps your head above water? And I think that we're in a time we need that probably more than ever, right? So yeah, and so our next question, Chanel or Misty, I can't remember who it was that is next. But
Nell's got it.
you got it?
Yep. The next question I have is, how can I talk to someone who I think might be thinking about suicide? How would I approach that?
One of the biggest concerns a lot of people have when they're thinking of talking to somebody who might be contemplating suicide is they're worried about implanting the idea. Worried about giving them the idea that, oh yeah, maybe suicide is an option. But you know what? If you're thinking that they might have that thought, you're not going to implant that idea. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to ask the question. Again, be kind, be doing it. But Colin's right. Ask for a plan. Ask, and then if they have a plan and they're admitting that they're suicidal, get them to talk to somebody. Let somebody know, because you don't want that hanging on your head that you knew and you did nothing if you try.
Sometimes the acknowledgement of where they're at, you know, that empathy Jerry talked about, and you know, just that fact of listening can pull them into a place where they might feel safe, and then they're hopefully more able to just kind of you know, let go of that thought, and then give you more of where they're at, where you know, what's driving that down, and then work with them.
Yeah, I just think we're all sitting on the board here of a conversation called "Are You Okay, Man?" And I think that's something, an icebreaker like that, just a simple, straightforward, you know, how are you doing, man? I've noticed something's not up, or you seem off today. Are you doing all right? Are things good at home? Things like that. Just a little check-in. If a person is at that point in their life where they are considering suicide, it's almost like being trapped under ice. And if you break that ice with just a simple question like that, a person could be willing to open right up from that broken ice. That's their breath of fresh air. Is you broke that ice that they were right underneath. And so that to me is what I would answer that question with, is just start a conversation and break that ice. And you would be amazed at, if they are at that point, what they will come to you with, and it will be that breath of fresh air for them.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Chris. It really is about, it is a direct question. You know, I see you've really been down lately, and are you thinking of hurting yourself? And as you said, Dallas, not being afraid to ask that question. And then if the answer is yes, getting the help that's needed. And yeah.
A great speaker a couple of years ago. His name's Kevin Hines. He jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. One of the biggest things that I took away from that conversation, he was on the bus going to school, and then he decided he was going to jump that. He was bawling on a public bus, and all he needed that day, he told himself, if one person asks me if I'm okay, I won't do it. He didn't. Nobody asked him. He ended up jumping off the bridge, somehow surviving, and it's an amazing story. The guy's like a great public speaker in regards to this. Never get a chance to watch him, listen to any of his talks. Highly suggest it.
Yeah, I think before we move on, this is all great. And before moving on to the next question, I often say that professionals, sometimes we're really good at keeping some of the best secrets about resources and trainings that are out there that are available. But for those that don't know, and this might be something for any of the coaches that are in the room partaking in this, there is training for suicide first aid. Essentially, right? And so I would encourage people who, if they're wanting to dive deeper in this and look into this, there are centers, and obviously in some of our more our bigger cities like Red Deer, Calgary, Edmonton, that offer training for people and equip them with the skills to be able to intervene. And I know a lot of our professionals in the room, myself included, have that training, but it is not just something that professionals can go and get. Community members can go and take the training. And much like you would go and get first aid from St. John or Red Cross, there's ASSIST is what it's called, and they offer a lot of trainings provincially. Now, it's obviously changed with COVID and things like that, but I encourage people down the road to look it up if it's something that they're wanting a bit more, meat on the bones for something like that. I think it's a really good training.
Clint, they may have something online because of COVID,
yeah.
But I know too, they've also, if you had enough members or participants, they sometimes come out to your area. So
yes, and that's a good point. I do know that our learning centers in Hannah and I know some places in Drumheller have had to try to bring them out if they get enough interest. So it's something to keep in mind when you see it on those community bulletin boards and Facebook and parts of town where they advertise those things. So yeah, thanks Martin for that. The next question, and I think we've touched a little bit on this tonight, so we might necessarily need to go more on it, but just maybe talking about some of the and maybe specifically for our rural communities and our communities here in Drumheller, Hannah, Morin, Delia, all these places, Cessford. What are some of the roadblocks and what causes maybe men to minimize getting help out here? Are we looking at work? Are we looking, is it religion? We've talked about confidentiality and public perception. I don't want to be seen going into that building. Are there anything else out there in roadblocks and things that just would prevent guys from getting help, and that we can maybe flush that out and say, like, it's really not as bad as they might think?
Yeah, I think it's some of it may in fact be the fact that, for men in particular, that whole fix-it attitude that we grow up with, we're providers, we're problem solvers, this kind of thing. We don't associate going for help as a courageous choice when in fact it is. Being able to talk about your emotions is actually a very brave thing to do, but we frame it as weakness. So if there's a barrier, I think that perhaps could be one of them.
in the video, it was mentioned that I think it was Mike who said cultural issue. Very much, it's still there. The culture of what a man is and how a man solves problems. It's constantly having dialogues with men about being able to be okay with talking, with sharing, with emoting.
And I maybe to add a bit more to that too, because there's a string of questions that I know that I was curious about, being someone who grew up rural and in this, but like that male stigma and all those sayings that we heard, like rub some dirt on it, cowboy up, real men don't cry, and it was maybe just a product of the times, but working the schools, you still see that, and you still see those types of statements being thrown around, just what are your guys' thoughts maybe to that male bravado, the stigma that's there?
I think a few of us have seen the male bravado go sideways. I have my own personal experiences with it after watching my dad try to get through traumatic experiences on his own and eventually just turning to the bottle and drinking it. I mean, that ends up, unfortunately, that male bravado, it's okay if you're not actually going through anything, but as soon as you actually start experiencing some hard times, it's so important to understand that it's not weak to to try to get some help?
I think a lot of you know, it's like it was touched on in the film. I touched on it in my keynote there that I did. It's just a matter of a lot of how a man identifies himself and how he his identity is in that he's a problem solver, and so he will, you know, if he's raised with that mentality of, you know, man up, do it the man way, all these things that Clint, like you said, Clint, we've heard, he does have that societal hesitation to speak up and to act upon that kind of stuff, and he does look for another avenue, like Dallas just said, you know, the bottle, or, you know, substance abuse, or whatever that person happens to look towards. They find another channel to put those, or to gear those emotions to, that doesn't necessarily help improve their situation or isn't necessarily a progressive step. And so that's, I think, the first step in having to deal with that is to let these people know that it is taking a step forward in a positive direction is just as fulfilling and just as much of a problem solving opportunity as turning to a bottle or whatever it is you happen to look at for your reprieve from that stuff.
Yeah, if we understand it as this is how we're socialized, which means it's a learned behavior. This is about how we're taught and learned, which also means that we can learn something different. But seeing that we're socialized by it, it also helps us to get some objective distance with it.
There's also what's happening that's culturally changing. You know, there's examples out there of men taking on family roles, taking care of the kids, being involved with their kids. You know, being part of raising and being in the activities. I see a lot of that happening. I did that with my two sons. I made sure I was there because my dad wasn't with me, so I wasn't going to be with that dad with my sons. So that was interesting, and I see and hear a lot of that as well in the shift. But it's a big boat to turn. But there are some things happening out there that are giving us examples of ways of being.
I agree with what Martin just said there about how there is a shift taking. Like, I'm obviously not in a rural atmosphere anymore, but just on the job sites and stuff, I've noticed that as the generation of people, maybe one before me, are on their way to retirement, are on their way to out of the workforce, that the younger generations are more open to these conversations and are more understanding of how this is working. So there's definitely that shift is happening, speaking from the perspective of the workforce, but it's a big ship. Like Martin said, it's a very big ship to have to start to turn. So we're only starting to turn the rudder now.
I have 4 grandchildren or 4 grandsons, and they're all being taught how to regulate their emotions, and it's super cool. They're being given what I didn't get, and as grandpa, I am doing my part. Like I'm helping to teach my grandsons will get what I didn't get.
Yeah, and I think that's just to kind of end this question. It's something that I know that I've started to see as well, and something that just even with what Martin was saying with roles, the idea of paternity leave, and seeing that now as being an option for men. You know, I think of maybe back even to my own father's generation, and the idea of paternity leave. That, like, what is that? That doesn't exist really. But we're seeing more men who are taking on those roles. It just makes more sense sometimes for them to be the one to stay home with the kids when they're babies and little and things like that. So there is that shift that is happening, which is I think it's a good thing. Misty or Chanel, I'm not sure who is next.
It would be me. So are there benefits to medication What about all the research being done on cannabis and it helping issues around mental health? So we're kind of looking at reducing stigma around cases that need medication.
I'll jump in real quick. You know, cannabis. A lot of people are going to these shops to get a quick 5-minute assessment and then get their green card. You know, to get smokable. In the research currently, you know, the higher THC levels, that's the delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, the part that gets you high, the more evidence there is of increased depression, increased anxiety, increased psychosis. Lots of evidence out there with that, and yet I'm hearing a lot of people talk about cannabis use to help with my anxiety and in getting off my anxiety medications, which is problematic, and we're seeing a bit of that. You know, there's low evidence right now with CBD with, and that's cannabidiol, and that's the part that they're really doing a lot of research on the medical side, and low levels THC with certain conditions. So there is a lot of research happening, which is legal now, which is great, but no evidence right now to back up anxiety, depression, psychosis. So it's alarming to hear that that you know, people are going to a supplier and getting advice to use you know, or authorization to get a use of cannabis, which is also the other piece is physicians don't prescribe cannabis, they authorize the use. So that's like getting an opioid, like you know, any pain medication that's really lethal can be, and then saying, you know, for pain you can just pick whatever opioid you can get out there, and okay, well today I'll use fentanyl and tomorrow I'll maybe try Dilaudid. Well, that's not going to work, and that's what the problem is currently with cannabis out there. So just an FYI, just wanted to throw in my some knowledge there.
Anybody else have anything to add? I know Martin's kind of my go-to with things like tobacco and cannabis. Actually, a lot of you are my go-tos. Whoever answers the phone are my go-tos on some of that stuff. But yeah, does anybody else have anything to add on that?
Sure, I'll add something simple. Doctor prescribed medications can be very helpful. Not every medication will work for every person. So if you are talking to a doctor and you're not getting the result from the medication you're having, just keep communicating with them. They might try something else. They might change the dose. There's all kinds of different medications that work for all kinds of different things. As long as it works for you and kind of it helps you feel better, then why wouldn't you give it a shot? As far as self-medicating with cannabis and everything, yeah, I hear that a lot too. And I mean, again, if it's doctor prescribed or something, then it's a little different. But I do stand by. I agree with Martin. It's just another way of self-medicating that you're not actually getting proper control over. I have never met anybody who's been prescribed cannabis and has actually followed the actual directions for what they're supposed to be taking it for. So that's the other thing. Abuse can happen from anything that's prescribed.
And just to add to Dallas, that was great. Thanks. The other piece is with the medications that do work, it's really helpful to actually not just rely on the medication, but also seek the counseling support. And together, they're more beneficial than just the medication. So there are really good medications out there, and but what helps with the medication is the counseling support.
Medication can also be a form of harm reduction. So with the opioid epidemic we've got right now, Suboxone, which is a partial agonist, has brought relief, to many opioid use disorder sufferers, if you will. And I'll put a plug in for the virtual opioid dependency program, which, yeah, you can access. You can connect with them just online, just punch up VODP. And in fact, during COVID, isolation and, well, even CERB money, we have had an escalation in opioid poisonings, and that's what I'll call them, primarily fentanyl. I was just looking at some figures a few days ago, and we had 428 deaths last year from opioids, and the first half of 2020 we had 360. So I'm not sure what the figures are right now at the end of this year, but they'll be exceptionally high. But there's an example where a medication has actually been, and again, we wouldn't prescribe Suboxone without counseling, without supportive therapy. But it can be a bridge, again, to recovery. And for many people, that may ultimately, down the line, be abstinence. So yeah, just putting in a plug for that one. The other one is meth. Meth has caused, I don't know what to say about it. It's just untold agony and damage to people and families. And there are individuals that have had some success with an antidepressant, some as they come off meth. Some individuals have actually been using meth to self-medicate for a long-standing ADHD problem, and have been able to move to a more appropriate, an appropriate medication to deal with that. So it can create a level playing field, but again, it needs to be monitored by a doctor. We encourage supportive counseling, all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, medication can definitely play a role.
To add to that, there's some medications for alcohol too, Jerry, right? And that help people with alcohol conditions. And there's been a resurgence of psychedelics, psychoactive drugs in clinical settings, not clandestine use, but supervised settings that's been helpful, and people are revisiting that.
And it's a microdose, it's not actual real.
And to just hit this home, because I know working with youth and my history in that, this all goes hand in hand with professional help, like Jerry had said, counseling. We're talking with doctors. We're going through the approved people who can help a person with this. So many kids, well, but I know my dealer. I was like, no, you don't. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna flat out say it. These are things to be done with proper professional help. We've got 3 more questions. We're gonna kind of power through it here. And this one, it has been touched on, but I like to drive it home because I know from my experience coming back home and into the areas that I work in, it's around confidentiality and wanting to really drive this one home. And so, say if I know someone who is struggling, but they do not want to access professional help because someone might find out. How can I help them? How can I reassure them that this is safe and that this is confidential? Just maybe quickly, and the professionals in the room, Martin, Jerry, Dallas, Colin, just to drive that point home.
Well, it was said earlier, the fact that because of COVID, the availability of phone, online, virtual sessions, and the opportunity to go, if you can, to a different community to access supports is helpful. and that's available now even more so. And you know, I know there was a time in our office earlier in the COVID time where we could only see clients via telephone and Zoom formats. And some people have continued that because that's their preference, which is wonderful to have that opportunity and that choice.
To jump in quickly, do you think that will be something that stays even beyond COVID? That's something that we'll be keeping?
Yeah, we're doing that for sure. It's one that's going to be offered as a continuum.
When I was speaking with the practice earlier the other day, that they're right now doing 60% of their business online. Clients are do their initial sessions in person, and after that they prefer online, and they suspect it's going to that way even after everything kind of normalizes again.
I still have people who want to come in face to face, just to let people know that. So some people do prefer face to face, just for comfort, and then some people now who I've known a long time. So often the first session will want to meet face to face just to get to know the person, but some people quite prefer the Zoom format, and you know, in their own private space. It's a wonderful, and I find they talk freer. So going back to what Colin said about the safety factor, you know, when you have to come in to an office to meet with a counselor, and that you present sometimes differently than you do in your own private space where you're really comfortable. And on this format, you know, that's quite interesting. I find that fascinating with some of the clients. So.
Okay, well, we've got 2 questions left. I'll let Misty go, and then we'll finish off with Chanel.
So where can I learn about signs and symptoms of different mental health problems such as depression, anxiety, etc.?
Well, I'm going to put a plug in for AHS. They have this incredible web page, and it's if you just Google COVID-19 help in tough times, I was supremely impressed with what they've come up with, resources on and everything in terms of symptoms, tools to deal with all kinds of mental health conditions, treatment, support, community support, gender issues, and so I would certainly encourage that you go to that AHS website. It's Help in Tough Times. That's a real good one. I'm just going to put another plug out for Families for Addiction Recovery, because we typically end up not talking enough about families that are coping with the individual that perhaps has a mental health concern, and certainly this particular website has resources and things that you can actually print right off, and great support for families wanting to understand addiction and how they can support a loved one. So that's Families for Addiction Recovery, FAR. Just Google that one.
So our last question is, what is one thing you hope that men take away from tonight?
I guess I'll go first. I just hope that, like I said at the end of my my speech there, just know that you're not alone. Know that people care about you and that you're not being judged. And know that, you know, anything mental health is a chemical problem, not a character flaw. And so just if you can get, you know, change the way you look at those things and change the way you view those things, it goes a long way to starting to change for the better with your mental health.
Okay, I'll leave with something my son said when he was 6. He said to me when I said, what advice would you give an adult who is feeling sort of down? And he said, have one good belly laugh a day. I love that, right off the cuff, not even thinking. And I still remember it. I wrote it down and I kept it with me for quite a long time. And I keep reminding him of that every once in a while. So that's kind of neat. So keep it simple. Do the simple things that make you feel good and that you're okay.
We're not meant to walk this human journey of life alone. It's just too hard that we need one another. We just need community. It's just too hard to do this journey on our own.
I would invite and encourage young men to make that courageous choice and ask for help, seek it out, I'd like to finish just with a quote from our Dr. Tanguay, who's our addiction specialist with AHS. He says, imagine a world where it's easier to get help than to get high.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like everybody kind of walk away from is, again, like it's okay to ask for help. Earlier the better, like we talked about earlier. Problems can compound. You start to develop bad habits, bad maladaptive coping mechanisms, and they get worse if they're left unchecked. So it's better to ask for help than to deal with the consequences of that later down the road.
Well, amen to that.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. And I'll add one thing too, just to some of the older guys that might be in the room, is that you're never too old to make a change to better yourself. So for those of guys that, again, that think that they're that deep down in the hole, the first step is always the toughest one, and it doesn't matter when you take it. You took it. So Misty, I know you wanted to just share one thing before I close this off, so I will let you step in here, and then I will finish our evening.
And on behalf of the Rural Mental Health Network for Drumheller and surrounding area, I just wanted to thank everybody for participating today, and for our panel for sharing so much with our participants and everybody here today, and taking the time out tonight to do that. Yeah, I just wanted to say a big, huge thank you. This was an amazing session, and a mom of a 7-year-old boy, it's nice to see that we're moving this direction, because he also has self-regulation issues. So we have been working on it for a very long time. So thank you, everybody.